Okay, let's unpack this. We are dropping everything to do a deep dive into what feels like a quiet, an existential countdown.
It's not so quiet anymore, though, is it?
Well, that's the thing. This isn't about the price charts or the next protocol upgrade. This is about the fundamental cryptography that underpins, the entire decentralized world.
Right.
We are talking about the coming quantum crisis and what it means for the millions of bitcoins and the majority of all ether currently secured by, well, by classical math.
It's often treated as this theoretical problem for the distant future, but the sources we're looking at confirm the threat is immediate. The stakes are massive.
So today we're diving into post-quantum cryptography, or PQC.
Yes, the new standards that have been formalized by NIST and the sheer engineering challenge of migrating systems built on algorithms like ECDSA and RSA that are now, effectively living on borrowed time.
And let's be really specific about the risk here. We are looking at estimates that millions of bitcoins are exposed. Conservatively, between 3.5 and 5.5 million BTC?
Which is a significant chunk of the total supply. A huge chunk.
And for Ethereum, the situation is maybe even more acute. Over 65% of all Ether is categorized as vulnerable once a large-scale quantum computer is operational.
So our mission today is clear. To understand the technical solutions and, I think more importantly, the massive governance hurdles that stand in the way of securing these assets. Indeed. This deep dive really focuses on that shift from classical cryptographic theory to the immediate practical challenge of migration. The threat is real, and getting the consensus you need in decentralized networks might be the hardest part of this whole equation.
To understand the solution, we have to start with a catastrophe. What exactly do quantum computers break? And maybe just as important, what don't they break?
The distinction really hinges on the type of mathematics they attack. We're concerned with two key quantum algorithms. The first, and honestly the most devastating, is Peter Shor's algorithm.
Right, developed decades ago.
Decades ago, yes. Shor's algorithm can efficiently solve the hard math problems that are the foundation of all modern public key cryptography. Things like prime factorization, which RSA uses, and the discrete logarithm problem,
which is used by Diffie-Hellman and, critically, by Bitcoin's signature algorithm, ECDSA.
Exactly, specifically SEC P256K1. So Shor's is the catastrophe for public key crypto. It just collapses the fundamental difficulty of those calculations.
But once it's functional at scale, those systems are just broken.
Precisely. In polynomial time, there is no patch for that. The math itself is fundamentally compromised.
Okay, and we often hear about the second algorithm, Grover's. Why does that one sound scary, but in reality it's considered manageable?
Right, so Grover's impacts symmetric key cryptography. Think of the AES standard we all use. It gives you a quadratic speedup for searching through possible keys.
Which sounds significant.
It is, but the defense is straightforward and it's well understood. We simply double the key length. So for instance, you just move from AES 128 to AES 256.
And that mitigates the threat.
It does. It requires more computational power, sure, but it doesn't represent an existential break like Shor's does to public key systems.
That helps clarify the distinction enormously. Now, let's address the timeline, because this is what turns a future problem into an immediate crisis. This concept of harvest now, decrypt later.
This is the chilling part. The time component forces action today. Any data encrypted right now that needs long-term secrecy, we're talking corporate secrets, military communications, health records.
Critical infrastructure components.
All of it. It can be stored or harvested by adversaries right now. Even if decryption requires a quantum computer 5 or 10 years down the road, the attacker can retroactively access all that captured information when the tech arrives.
So the risk is present the moment the data is sent, not the moment the computer turns on.
Exactly.
And speaking of turning on, how rapidly is that hardware timeline accelerating? I know the goalposts seem to be moving much, much closer.
They are converging aggressively. Conservative estimates, like the ones from NIST in their risk reports, might still put the threat window between 2035 and 2050.
Right.
But if you listen to aggressive industry leaders and national labs, they are now pinpointing the arrival for a cryptographically relevant quantum computer between 2027 and 2035.
2027. If that is even close to accurate, that's less than 5 years away.
Yeah.
Has anything fundamentally changed to cause such a dramatic shift?
There was a crucial technical advance. It was reported in early 2025 research from Google's quantum team. They analyzed what it would take to crack RSA 2048 and found it might require significantly fewer resources than we previously modeled.
How much fewer?
Potentially less than 1 million noisy qubits running for under a week. Now, breaking Bitcoin's ECDSA is computationally different from RSA, but this research signaled a huge reduction in the barrier to entry.
The resources needed went from unthinkable to merely extremely difficult.
That's a good way to put it. It sped up the entire schedule.
Which brings us right back to our assets. If I'm holding Bitcoin, what makes my funds vulnerable? Is it just the old coins, the Satoshi-era stuff?
The vulnerability depends entirely on whether your public key has been broadcast to the world. So yes, the very early P2PK addresses directly expose the public key. They're vulnerable immediately.
But what about the more common address types? P2PKH, Taproot.
They become exposed after their first transaction. When you spend the Bitcoin, the public key has to be broadcast on the blockchain to verify the signature.
So if I've ever sent funds from a certain address, even a modern Taproot address, the clock is already ticking on the rest of those funds because my public key is now public knowledge.
Exactly. Once the public key is known, a quantum attacker has all the time in the world, weeks, months, to apply Shor's algorithm and get the private key. Analysts estimate those 3.5 to 5.5 million at-risk BTC are largely sitting in these exposed address types.
And then there's the other attack vector, the short-range attack.
Right, the rapid-fire one. If a quantum computer is fast enough, it could crack the private key from the public key broadcast during that 10 to 60-minute transaction confirmation window.
And then steal the funds before my transaction even confirms.
By submitting a competing transaction with a higher fee, it's a race against time measured in minutes.
That is terrifying. Now, what about Ethereum? It uses the account model, which is structurally different. Does that offer any inherent protection?
Unfortunately, no. It actually makes the vulnerability worse for long-term holders.
How so?
Ethereum's account model inherently encourages address reuse. Once an Ethereum address sends funds, its public key gets captured in the blockchain's world state.
And the funds stay at that exposed address.
Precisely. So over 65% of all Ether is vulnerable to a simple storage attack. The key is already public, and the attacker has ample time to crack it. It's far more pervasive than in the Bitcoin UTXO model.
Okay, let's pivot to the path forward. Governments and massive security institutions have clearly woken up to this threat. What are the concrete, standardized solutions available right now?
The solution is really the culmination of 2 decades of research, centralized by NIST. They finalized the first 3 major post-quantum cryptography standards in August 2024.
And these new algorithms, they move away from the math that Shor's breaks.
Completely. They shift to mathematical problems that are provably hard even for quantum computers, mostly based on something called lattice-based cryptography.
So instead of factoring numbers, they're solving vector geometry problems.
That's the key idea. It's based on things like the shortest vector problem or learning with errors. These are just a different class of mathematical difficulty that scales effectively against quantum power.
Excellent context. So what are the 3 core standards we need to know?
They are divided into key establishment and digital signatures. First, you have FIX 203, which is ML-Chem. It's a key encapsulation mechanism, so its job is securely agreeing on a shared secret key.
And that's based on Crystal's Kyber.
Correct. Then there's FIPS 204, or ML-DSA, based on Crystal's dilithium. This is the new digital signature standard. It's the leading candidate for general use because it has a pretty good performance profile.
And the third?
The third is FIPS 205, SLH DSA, based on Sphinx's plus Midley. This is a stateless hash-based signature. It offers extremely solid conservative security. The drawback is that its signatures are notably longer, which creates challenges.
And that performance trade-off is where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? These PQC algorithms, they have drastically larger keys and signatures.
The sheer size is the systemic issue. I mean, take a standard security level of ML-DSA. Its signature sequence can be around 14,724 bytes.
Compared to what we use now.
A few hundred bytes for current classical schemes. It's a massive difference.
Can you give us a practical example of how that size increase creates latency just in the real world? The clearest example is the backbone of the internet. TLS and WebPKI, securing web connections. When you start a secure connection, you need to exchange keys and signatures very fast. Right.
Well, that 14,724 byte signature pushes dangerously close to the typical default TCP initial congestion window limit, which is around 14,600 bytes.
Wait, so if the cryptographic handshake is larger than the TCP window,
Yeah.
it can't complete in one go.
Exactly. It forces the system to require extra round trips to complete the key exchange. That could cause significant latency and slowdowns in establishing every single secure web connection.
So adoption isn't just swapping out code, it's a deep, systems architecture overhaul.
A fundamental one, yes.
So who's leading this massive transition effort? This has to be guided by government mandate.
The U.S. government is treating it as a national security imperative. There's a National Security Memorandum, NSM-10, that set the goal of mitigating quantum risk by 2035 for all federal systems.
And that effort is led by NIST.
Yes, by NIST's National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, or NCCOE. They're spearheading the migration to PQC project, working with giants like IBM, Microsoft, JP Morgan Chase, and the NSA to develop practical guidance and test everything.
And as an interim step, I'm hearing a lot about hybrid schemes. Is that just hedging their bets?
It is an intelligent form of hedging, yes. Hybrid schemes combine a classical algorithm, say ECDH, with one of the new PQC algorithms.
Gotta go.
It ensures that if, by some chance, one of the new PQC algorithms is later found to have a flaw, which is always a risk with brand new crypto, you still have the classical algorithm providing protection.
So it slows things down but buys you safety.
It slows performance and adds complexity, but it allows migration to begin safely and maintains what we call crypto agility throughout the transition. Okay, so the technology for the counterattack is emerging. But here's the most difficult question. How do decentralized, trustless networks like Bitcoin and Ethereum actually execute a mandatory migration? Any change requires community consensus, forks, and potentially rewriting ownership history. And this is where the quantum crisis shifts from a cryptography problem to an unprecedented governance test. Addressing those 3.5 to 5.5 million vulnerable dormant Bitcoins creates a massive philosophical clash in the community.
Pitting the burn approach against the rescue approach.
Exactly.
Walk us through the burn mentality first, the QRAMP proposals. What's their core argument?
The proponents of the forced burn argue that Bitcoin must preserve its original design integrity above all else. They suggest setting a hard drop-dead date. Meaning any coin not migrated to a new quantum-safe address becomes permanently unspendable, effectively destroyed. They see it as bitter medicine, but necessary to preserve the network's long-term integrity.
They argue that coin loss is just an acceptable risk of a trustless system.
Right. And that human intervention to save lost keys violates the core principle.
Okay, so what about the humanitarian alternative, the rescue proposal?
The leading example there is QSAVE, spearheaded by people like James Tagg. QSAVE aims to avoid burning assets entirely. The concept is a coordinated white hat recovery race.
So vulnerable coins get swept into a secure holding fund.
Yes, a sort of non-sovereign wealth fund. The principle is 100% preserved for the rightful owner, protecting assets lost due to old wallets or inheritance issues. The classic anti-Alice's Bitcoin scenario.
If the alternative is watching millions of Bitcoins get stolen by a quantum adversary, wouldn't most users tolerate a slight centralization risk in exchange for 100% protection? Isn't protecting assets the paramount goal here?
That is the profound dilemma at the heart of this whole debate. Opponents, like the analysts Conduition and Javier Mateos, argue that QSAV's solution fundamentally introduces centralized trust back into the system.
Which is an unacceptable poison.
To them, yes. To claim recovered funds under QSAVE, the owner must go through a claim verification protocol. This protocol requires human arbitration using government ID, transaction history, and oversight by a multi-council structure.
So the mechanism designed to save the assets requires a centralized authority to decide who owns what.
Exactly, and that arbitration process violates Bitcoin's founding philosophy. Critics say Bitcoin was designed to be a trustless electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof. By installing a human counsel to verify claims, you've abandoned that.
The choice is whether to preserve the money or preserve the philosophy.
That's it in a nutshell.
It truly is a profound dilemma with no easy answer. The future of decentralized finance rests not just on the brilliance of new cryptography, but on the ability of its communities to choose an upgrade path without fracturing the very model they were built on.
The sources make it utterly clear. The transition to PQC is inevitable and profoundly complex. It requires new algorithms like FIPS 203, 204, and 205. But the technology is only half the battle.
The other half is architectural adjustments and these governance decisions.
Unprecedented governance decisions about asset ownership that force a difficult look at the very meaning of trustless.
The U.S. government aims to be quantum resistant by 2035, requiring complex systems to gain crypto agility, the ability to replace crypto without system collapse. But for decentralized systems, maybe the true measure of crypto agility won't be in the code.
but in the community's capacity to adopt a consensus.
A consensus that might challenge the very principles they were founded upon.
That is the question that will determine success. I mean, Satoshi anticipated the community replacing a failed hash function, not necessarily installing a trusted third party to adjudicate ownership over millions of BTC. The community have to decide, and the clock is counting down.
A heavy thought to end our deep dive on, indeed. Thank you for walking us through this post-quantum cryptography countdown. If you want to stay ahead of the next big technological shift, be sure to subscribe.